It's probably out of desperation that someone would choose to panhandle on the streets. We should show sympathy and kindness to those in need, but what if that kindness is abused and desperation turns into something more violent? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and get ready for stories where asking for change became more about aggressiveness than charity. Sneaker. Mom with little kids traveling alone in Arizona. My husband is flying to meet up with us later. It was starting to get late, so we pulled into a motel parking lot in Flagstaff. I saw a youngish but kind of down on his luck looking guy strolling through the lot. Flagstaff has a university and a train station, no biggie. You see college students and vagrants there all the time. I pulled into a slot, jumped out, and went around to the van side door to get kids and stuff out so we can check in. As I bent over fussing with gear, I sensed something behind me, so I straightened up and turned around. The guy was about 6 inches away from me, and we were between cars. I was so freaked out, I got right up in his grill and spat "beat it" in his face. He took off. Poor guy was probably just panhandling, but he should know better than to sneak up like that on a woman, especially one with kids. So, creeping dude, don't mess with Mother Bear. If your mission was benign, hope you found someone more accommodating. The homeless guy. I go to a school in a big city that has a somewhat large population of homeless people. Being a college student, these homeless people will approach me thinking I have money to give them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but most of the time I don't. Although one homeless man has taken a liking to me in particular. The first time I met this man was at a pizza place by my school. It was late, maybe 10 or 10:30 at night. The homeless man came in and sat at my table attempting to woo me for some cash. I listened to his story about how he used to play basketball for the school and that he had hit a rough patch in his life, aka typical made up feel bad for me, give me money story. I told him I had no money for him and I'm sorry about the situation he's in. And he left angry. I got my pizza and went to my room. A few weeks passed before I saw the man again. It was around 2 p.m. on a Saturday, and I had been walking around campus when he stopped me on the sidewalk. He said he remembered me from the first encounter and that he was still looking for cash. I told him no, and that I was in a hurry to meet someone. I'm walking away, and he shouts, "I know who you are," my name. I pause, turn around, and ask, "How do you know my name?" He smiles and says, "I have my ways." I tell him to leave me alone and don't follow me or I'll call the cops. We went separate ways. Months go by with no contact with the homeless man. I thought I was in the clear, but I was wrong. During the week of finals, I was walking back to my room on campus, and he crosses my path again. I put on my "don't mess with me" face and plan to just walk past him. He attempts to talk to me, and I shrug him off and continue walking. When I get past him, he shouts, "I'll see you at the arena." At the time, I was doing an internship for a major sports team in the city. I stop, turn around, and shout, "Who the fuck are you?" He smiles again and says, "I have my ways." I didn't just accept this answer this time. I reply seriously, "How do you know all of this?" He keeps that obnoxious hobo smirk on his face, and he says, "I live on these streets, and I know everything on these streets." It was clear that he wanted to bully me into giving him money. and he stuck to his story about everything. At this point, I reported the man. I gave the police a detailed description of the man that very night, and they looked for him. I have yet to hear if he had been arrested or if he's still out there. Somehow, he found out where I worked and my name without me ever mentioning it to him. I completed my internship, and I have a new job somewhere else. But I still wonder if he's out there still waiting for me. Lack of situational awareness almost got us killed. A few months ago, after getting off work at around 8 p.m., I went with my wife and our 4-year-old daughter to the local Walgreens pharmacy to pick up a prescription. I didn't feel like going, but this particular Walgreens is in a kind of crappy neighborhood, so I decided to tag along. The whole car ride to the pharmacy, my wife was on her phone texting, Facebooking, tweeting, or whatever she does on there all the time. The sun was almost set when we got there, but it wasn't totally dark yet. As we were walking to the entrance, my wife was still on her phone, barely paying attention to where she was walking, and leaving me to wrangle the 4-year-old. As we neared the entrance, I see 2 homeless men panhandling by the front doors. Common occurrence for this place. When only a few feet away, the larger of the 2 men asked me for money. I tell him I don't have a dime. He replies, "No problem. I'll catch you on the way out." It wasn't so much what he said as how he said it that sent a chill up my spine. There was a tone of malice in his voice, and an emphasis on the word catch that made it seem like I would have problems when leaving the store. I mentioned this to my wife and told her she should be paying more attention in situations like this. She called me a douche canoe or something like that, and we entered the pharmacy. In the pharmacy, and the prescription wasn't ready yet. Why would it be? We only called it about 5 hours ago. That gave us about 30 minutes to walk around, with my wife looking up from her phone just enough to fill a shopping cart full of crap that we didn't need. It was also just enough time to get my daughter into one of those moods where she wasn't going to listen to anything I said anymore. Other parents know this mood when a child is tired and has been told to behave so many times that they eventually just ignore what you are saying. Kind of like when you say the same word over and over again, it starts to lose its meaning and just sounds weird. The prescription was finally done. We paid for everything, and I am loaded up with multiple plastic grocery sacks of crap in both arms. Upon leaving the pharmacy, I am relieved that the 2 homeless fuckers are gone. I also noticed how much darker it was outside, and how many of the lamps that were supposed to light the dirty parking lot were not working. I led the way, hands full, followed by my daughter, and finally my wife, who is still in the midst of a phone blow Insta tweet book session. I had to keep reminding my daughter to stay in between us and to watch for cars, but at this point, she wasn't even responding to me. As we neared our Jeep, I looked over my shoulder and watched the homeless men appear from between the parked cars. The bigger of the 2 was in the lead and has his right hand behind his back. I noticed that my daughter was dawdling behind my wife, trying not to step on cracks and whatnot. My wife was still paying zero fucking attention to anything other than her phone. The homeless men were closing the gap, the one in the lead still with his right hand behind his back. I reached the Jeep and frantically fumbled with the keys and the grocery bags. I finally got the door unlocked and tossed the bags on the passenger side floor. My wife got there next and started to get in while still looking at her phone. I turned and saw my daughter is still a good distance away and that the homeless man was right behind her and reaching for her with his left hand. I barked out for her to get to the Jeep right away. The tone and volume of my voice must have shocked her out of La La Land, and she sprinted towards me. I lifted her up and put her on my wife's lap and shut the door. I turned, and the homeless guy was right there, inches from my face. The smell of Thunderbird and bad decisions hit me in a wave. I backed up the few inches I could until I was against my vehicle. I noticed his right hand is still behind his back. He noticed me noticing this, and the most evil grin spread across his face. We stood like this for what seemed like an eternity. He finally broke the silence, and with the same malice as before, asked me for money. With my left hand, I slowly reached across the front of my body and pulled up my t-shirt on the right side of my body. At the same time, my right hand wrapped around the grip of my pistol I carry concealed at my 4 o'clock. I popped it out of the holster just enough so that it was obvious what it was. The homeless man noticed. I noticed him noticing. I looked him square in the eye and told him I didn't have a fucking dime. His left hand flew up in protest, and he began backing away, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. He continued backing up, with his right hand behind his back until he and his friend disappeared into the darkness. I never saw what was in his right hand. I got in the Jeep with my heart racing and looked over at my wife, still looking at her phone. She had missed the entire thing. At that point, I lost it. Now, the story up to this point is creepy enough, but it got worse. We got home after a long discussion about paying attention and put our daughter to bed. We settled in on the couch and turned on the 10 o'clock news. The breaking story was of a stabbing that had just occurred. The suspect was in custody, and the victim was going to survive. The mugshot of the suspect flashed up on the screen, and my heart sunk. It was the homeless man from the Walgreens pharmacy. He had stabbed someone with a pair of scissors 2 blocks from the pharmacy, and about 15 minutes after our encounter. I thank my lucky stars that I decided to go with my wife that night, and that I paid attention to my surroundings. I cannot imagine what could have happened to my wife or daughter had I not been there. And for the record, when we are out and about, my wife's phone now stays in her purse.